You're listening to episode 17 of the On Being Human podcast, now on iTunes and Apple Podcasts.
Welcome to the On Being Human podcast, where we believe transforming ourselves can positively transform society. Your host, Brandy Fleck, has the honor of exploring the human condition with real people who bravely share their personal stories of adversity, healing, joy, and more. If you're seeking empowerment, strength, and inspiration, listen in to engage and explore tough topics that help us humanize one another, understand ourselves better, spread love, and connect.
This week's guest, Christina Reckard, is truly an example of someone who does what it takes to follow her passions and be true to herself, regardless of what comes her way. And you guys, Christina was held at gunpoint about 3 years ago, but bounced back like the rock star she is, and she's going to tell you what she went through and what it was like to heal from that traumatic experience. Christina is a professional singer here in Nashville, Tennessee, who also currently works as a marketing executive for a well-known media personality in town. When Christina first moved to Nashville, she started out working for a record label where she gained valuable industry experience from the other side of the mic, too. But live performance is what Christina loves, mainly because of the people. She's been performing since she was 4 years old. She's performed on cruise ships in various bands over the years, full-time and part-time, depending on what else was going on in life. And she successfully did some soul-searching to figure out what her own music really sounds like, and made a record you can find on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, and any other place you listen to music. So let's dive in to hear about how Christina got to where she is today, which is all part of the mentality and resilience that helped her through the hard times. Hi, Christina. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited to have you here because I feel like your life is just so interesting. So to get started, can you just tell us about yourself? What is your life like today?
Yeah, well, today, I guess going back a little bit just to give some people some context. So I grew up in Indiana in a little rural community, and really got excited about music, which was a little bit unusual. My mom taught piano lessons, but was certainly not someone who ever wanted to pursue music as a career. And my father was a CPA, so very, very practical. But I always grew up just wanting to do music professionally and really wanting to see what else was out there. So I actually started performing the first time in my life at about 4 years old.
Wow.
At our church. And it was just something that I immediately took to. I was passionate about, ended up going to college for music as a vocal performance major. And while I was in school, I actually got the opportunity to go and do some cruise ship work over the summer. So in between semesters, I would go and either work on a cruise ship, or I did a theme park for a few summers. And so really got to experience some different things. I'd never been anywhere on an airplane before.
Gotcha.
I had never been in a cab. I had to fly to Miami by myself, figure out how to get in a cab, how to get around. So it was a very cool experience and a very interesting way to learn things very, very quickly. So I got to do that for a while, went back to school. And after school, I got the opportunity to continue to do the cruise ship work, which was fantastic, singing and dancing and getting to do my own shows and really just getting to meet people from all over the world and getting to experience different things, which was really all I had been wanting to do. So shortly after that, I was supposed to go on another ship. There was a company that was starting a new cruise line, and they were going to be bringing one of their first ships out of Italy, and had asked me to come work as a performer on that inaugural cruise. At the last minute, they had to cancel the performers because they needed the crew for more technical staff. They needed those rooms for technical staff. So at the last minute, I had no job. I had no place to be. I had already broken my lease. I had quit the band I was performing in at the time locally. And so I just decided, I kind of threw a dart at a map and decided to move to Nashville. So that's really what brought me to Nashville.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it wasn't intentional at all. I would say shortly thereafter, I found a job working at a record label, and so was able to work there. I started on the phones, and then we had a salesperson who unfortunately was in a car accident. She ended up being fine, but needed to be out for a while. So I moved into sales and then moved into marketing and really enjoyed that. And it gave me the flexibility to continue to pursue what I truly loved, which was performing. And so I was able to really pursue a recording career while I was working full time at the label and really gaining that business experience to give me a good understanding, not only from the artist perspective, but also from the label perspective. And I think that was really, really beneficial.
Gotcha.
Following that, I just kind of, at some point, I did the whole pursuing the deal thing, had management and producers and the whole 9 yards, and was really actively trying to pursue a country deal.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, it really just hit me that everyone else was telling me who I wanted to be. And I was not telling myself the kind of music that I wanted to do. And I'd had a crossroads like that earlier in my career where I had an opportunity to go to Europe and do kind of a pop, hip hop type project that I originally agreed to do. And then at some point, I just found myself on the floor of my apartment crying because the biggest fear I had was that would actually be successful.
Oh.
And I knew it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I wanted to do. And to me, nothing could be worse than to follow my dream, but then have it be a nightmare and not have it be what was truly me.
Right.
So at that point, I just kind of made the decision that if I was going to continue to pursue music, it had to be music that I loved. And so I was fortunate enough that I'd met a lot of people here in town and got to know lots of different musicians, and had someone one day just ask me, if you could do anything and you could work with anyone, who would that be and what would you do? And I just said, well, I love the music of the Mavericks. They were a 1990s country, Tejano, Cuban influence, just really eclectic group. And their lead singer, Raul Malo, was one of my biggest musical influences. And so I didn't really understand that the person I was talking to had been working with him for a very long time and had the ability to introduce me.
That's crazy.
It was insane. And by the next day, I had a meeting at Raul's studio, and he was playing me music, and he asked me what I wanted to do. And that really kind of led me in a new musical direction and really just kind of changed how I view music and what being successful in music means to me, and really kind of brought me to my current state as far as my music career goes.
Okay. So what is your current state and what kind of music do you sing?
Yeah, so what we ended up doing, I worked with Raul and then also the guitar player from the Mavericks, his name is Eddie Perez. We worked together on a project called Kaleidoscope, and it ended up being, I guess for lack of a better term, you'd call it Americana music.
Okay.
It's definitely pop influence. There's a lot of Cuban music influence. There's some jazz, there's some swing, there's a little country, little Everly Brothers type sound in there. So definitely eclectic, but it finally felt like me. And was so excited to get to do that. And in addition to that, I've just been so blessed to get to sing with lots of different bands here in town that that do private parties, that do festivals, do lots of types of music, lots of 70s and 80s and party band music, which I always enjoy getting to do because generally those types of bands get to perform at people's biggest celebrations. It's big birthdays, it's your wedding, it's your class reunion, it's a big charity event that you care about. And I just really enjoy getting to see people at those moments in their life that you know are going to be really pivotal to them.
Sure. And are you actively playing with a band right now?
Actually, right now I'm working. I've kind of decided I wanted to do my own thing again. So I'm working to put a new band together to focus more on Americana music. So hopefully we will be out and about soon. In the meantime, I'm still subbing with some bands doing some 70s and 80s music, but really excited to get back out there and do my own music again.
Awesome. Well, that's good to hear. So that brings me to, we've talked a little bit about what you love about life. I take it music makes you very happy, but is there anything else that you love about life, and what else makes you happy?
Yeah, for me, life is just kind of an adventure. So I like to be able to experience new things. I've always been blessed that in my career, whether it's music or my day job, I have always been able to get to travel and try new things and meet new people. And that just brings me so much joy. And being able to entertain and really bring happiness to people is something I love. Mostly live entertainment. Recording's wonderful, but I like to be there with the people and the crowds. But I think overall, the thing that truly, truly makes me happy, and I think I recognize this more every single year, are the people that I love. Just truly getting to spend time with people that matter in my life. For so many years, I was on the road. I traveled a lot. I missed important events. I missed birthdays and weddings and funerals and just things that I wasn't able to make it home for. And so now in my life, really the top priority is making sure I'm available to those people that matter the most to me.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that's a lesson that I've learned too. Of course, I didn't travel like you did. I'm not in the music industry, but definitely a good lesson.
Yeah.
And so not only are you a beautiful singer, but you're also a marketing executive for a really well-known company here in Middle Tennessee. So tying that into the personal relationships that are important to you, can you tell us how you manage your time and balance being an executive with pursuing music and also maintaining those relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a challenge everybody has in their lives. I think the whole balance between your work and your personal life and trying to keep everything in a healthy place is so difficult. For me, I really try to work full out while I'm at work. And some of that bleeds over at home, but I've really gotten much better over the last few years of really, when I'm at home, I'm home. When I'm with my family, I'm with my family. When I'm with my friends, I'm not on my phone. I really try to compartmentalize it as much as I possibly can. It really takes a lot of discipline, and I have to live my life out of a lot of lists and make sure that I'm doing all the things and making sure that everything's running smoothly. A lot of it has to do, too. I'm so fortunate. In my current role, have been able to build my own team from scratch. And so all of the people who work for me there at the company are so amazing, and I can delegate and I can trust, and it's such a collaborative environment that it just makes it so much easier for me to walk away and go home in a way that I couldn't have several years ago. And so I think that's part of it too, is really figuring out who those people are in your life that you can delegate to, whether it's at home or at work, and really building that trust so that people don't feel like it's all on them. And I think women in particular are absolutely terrible about thinking we have to do everything and we have to be superwoman and we've got to be the best at this and at that. And if not, we're failing people. And I just think that that's not a fair thing to put on ourselves. At some point, you have to just be able to trust others and admit that sometimes you're not going to be able to devote quite as much time and attention to something as you wanted, as long as you're choosing the right thing to dedicate that time to.
Awesome. I think there are a lot of good takeaways there. So some of the things I heard you say for the listeners to take away would be list building, delegating, trusting those around you to help you, really. And
Yeah.
in a lot of the interviews I've done, the theme of support systems come up a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just having that support from people around you is really important.
Absolutely. It's huge. And I think we try to go it alone. And if there's one thing we've learned over the years, especially as we become so much more of a social media culture, that we've kind of substituted that level of interaction with people for true personal interaction.
Yeah.
I think it's just so important to maintain those personal relationships and make time for the people that you love and trust the people around you. I think that we may have become a little bit gun shy in our culture today to trust others. And at some point, you really have to just let that go.
How important do you think it is to pursue your passions? And what does that do for you? And I know that it's sort of a balancing act for everyone to pursue their passions. So I'm interested in your thoughts on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just always been a person who put my passions first. And I don't know if that's right for everybody, but I've known that since I was a kid, that if I didn't have music as a big part of my life, that I would never be happy. I didn't always take a very conventional route to my career or my life choices. But for me and what I cared the most about, I knew that I would never be happy and I'd live a whole life of what if I didn't go out and pursue music in my life. And so for me, to this day, it always has to be a part of my life, whether it's singing in my local church or doing charity events or recording or doing gigs or whatever that might be. It has to stay a constant part of my life for me to really feel like I'm fulfilled, or just sort of feel like I'm not myself. I'm playing a role and I'm somebody else. And I don't think that's a comfortable place to be in.
Sure.
I just think that if people are going to be truly, truly happy, I mean, life is just too short to not try those things that you've always wanted to try, and just go out there and pursue those things that bring you joy and bring you happiness. And I don't think it always has to be your career. I've had times in my life where my entire career was music. And there's times like now where it's a part of my life, but it's not necessarily where I make my living full time. And it's okay either way. I think that people just need to give themselves the grace to actually go out and pursue what makes them happy.
That's a really good point. And to do that, I guess you make decisions in your life to involve your passions, right?
Yeah.
Do you actively, intentionally seek it out?
I do. And I think if you don't, you will let it go, because something will always be more important. And I think that we live our lives based on the urgent instead of what truly is important. I think the urgent becomes important. But if we really stop and look and evaluate what brings us the most happiness, the most fulfillment, it's not always those urgent things that seem to pop up during our days and distract us. And so you have to be really intentional, because no one nowadays has just this free time laying around to pursue their passion, or they may not feel like they have enough money to make that happen, or enough freedom, or they have too many responsibilities. And I think we can all find some way to incorporate those things that we're really passionate about into our daily life. But I don't think it happens without intentionality.
Gotcha. So to pivot a little bit, I know that you are a newlywed and you recently got married.
I did.
Yeah, how's that going?
Oh, you know what? It's great. I will say, though, being married later in life is very different than getting married in your 20s.
Okay.
And I think that people underestimate that a little bit. And it's, in so many ways, it's so much better, because you both know who you are as people. You're pretty established in your life and in who you are and in what's important to you. But I think, too, it can be a little challenging, because you've got two adults with two very separate lives and trying to combine those into one can be a challenge, but it's been absolutely fantastic. He's great. He's supportive. It's great to be intentional in this part of my life and really search out somebody who adds so much value to my life.
Good. So, I imagine that is he involved in, I guess, your music endeavors, or just in a support role, or how does that work with you guys?
Yeah, so he is also a musician. He does not do that full time for a living, but he does pursue music as well, and he's incredibly talented. It's interesting. We're trying to figure out how that works together. We both volunteer and lead music at our church, and we do that together. And then he goes off and he does gigs on his own, and I've done gigs on my own, and we're kind of trying to figure out what do we do together, because my type of music may not be his type of music. And so we're really trying to learn kind of which things we're going to do as a team and which things we're going to say, hey, that's your thing, you go do it, and I will be there and cheer you on. And it's been fun to kind of figure that out and let each other know that's okay. If I want to do something that you're not excited about being a part of musically, that's totally okay. There will be those things that we want to do together, and there'll be some things that we want to do on our own.
Awesome. So to shift again to a different personal experience of yours that must have been surreal and frightening and devastating, you have been through the traumatic event of being held at gunpoint.
Yes.
And so, yes, this kind of thing can be a pivotal point in a person's life. And so, was it for you?
It was eye-opening. I felt like I was always a person who was pretty cautious, who was aware. Obviously, I said I've traveled all over the place. I've traveled alone. So I've always been someone who kind of considered myself aware of my surroundings and didn't feel like I would likely be a victim of something like this. So it really has changed my perception of things and made me hyper aware of my circumstances at any given time.
Gotcha. And just to go back a little bit we had touched on the topic of trust earlier. Has it impacted your ability to trust others?
I don't think it's impacted my ability to trust, but it has made me more aware of situations. It's made me certainly more cautious. I do still trust people, but I would say it's more of a trust but verify type situation.
Sure.
So it's definitely there, but I'm just very thankful that it hasn't caused me to change my daily rhythms or change the way I go about my daily life. It really hasn't caused me to make significant changes in that way.
Good. So can you tell us what happened? What were the details?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a few years ago now, and it was actually a Sunday afternoon. I had gone out for brunch with a girlfriend of mine, and it was very strange. We went out for lunch, and as I was leaving, she kind of stopped me, and she didn't want me to go. And I couldn't figure out why, but she just had a very bad feeling. And then after I left her, I just had an errand to run very quickly. So I came back to my side of town, and I needed to run into a store and drop something off. And so I went in, did my return. I came back out to the parking lot and drove home. It was about a mile from my house. It's the middle of the afternoon, sunshiny day on a Sunday afternoon. So I didn't think anything of it. And so I got back to my house, and the way my home is situated, I can park behind my house, which I always thought was more of a safety feature because people wouldn't see me getting out of the car, in and out of the car with packages.
Mm-hmm.
So I never really gave it much thought, but I'm getting out of the car and I'm walking up my back deck, and I hear somebody shouting at me. And I look down from my deck, and there's a guy approaching me, and there was just something about the way he was looking at me and he's shouting that I knew I was in trouble instantly. And I immediately just told him, "You've got to get off my property or I'm calling the cops." And so I pulled my phone out and immediately started to dial 911. But before I could get that accomplished, he had run up the back deck and was holding a gun to my head.
Oh.
And yeah, it was so surreal. And what's crazy is while that part of it happened so quickly, the rest of it seemed to almost happen in slow motion. And he's shouting at me and he's shouting at me and he's trying to get me to let him into the house. And all I kept thinking is, I can't let this person in my home. If I let him in there, I live alone. Nobody's going to know. And he could do anything. So I thought, worst case scenario, I'm running. He can shoot at me if he wants. And I'm going to jump off this back deck if I have to. Mm-hmm. But I screamed. And evidently when I screamed, it startled him. He didn't expect me to scream. And so that kind of changed his plans because we're in the middle of the afternoon. There's people everywhere. I live in a very active neighborhood. So he changed his plan and said, just give me your purse. And so I had seen on television before that if you would throw the purse at the attacker, he will likely turn and try to catch it. So I kept my keys, I kept my phone, and I threw my purse at him. And he dropped the gun to catch the purse, and I let myself into the house and locked the door behind me. I ran in, I called 911, and I locked myself in a bathroom in the house. And it was a few seconds later, I could hear someone at the back door pounding on the back door and just hollering at me. Ugh. And I was absolutely certain that it was him trying to get into my home. I'm on the phone with 911. They're sending the police. Finally, the police get here. I don't hear the pounding anymore. And the 911 operator assures me, she's like, you stay on the phone with me, but the cops are at your front door. I promise you it's the cops. You go ahead, you stay on the phone with me, and you answer the door. And so I went to the door, and the detectives were there, and they were absolutely fantastic. So they sat with me, they comforted me. It turns out that the pounding that I heard while I was in the bathroom was actually a neighbor who heard me scream, and he thought I'd been shot. And so he came running. He had noticed earlier, and this was something I could not see from where I was behind the house, the guy who was robbing me, his girlfriend drove him to my home. Okay. And parked kind of perpendicular to my driveway, blocking my driveway. And my neighbor had security cameras that had a view of my house and happened to see that on a screen in his house and thought that was strange. He'd never seen anyone park like that in front of my house. He knew I lived alone. So then he was already kind of heading outside. So when he heard me scream, he came running, and he happened to get outside in time to catch a partial license plate as well. Oh, wow. So, yeah, so that was super helpful. The police were absolutely wonderful and really kind of stayed with me for quite a while. I was fortunate enough to have the friend who I'd been at brunch with. I called her, and she was over at my home immediately to sit with me while I waited to hear back from the cops and find out kind of where things were. But that was the events of the day. Okay. I was fortunate enough that several hours later, right before I was getting ready to go to bed, I was still kind of sitting with my girlfriend and kind of talking through the day. And the lead detective called me and let me know that they had caught the perpetrator and his girlfriend. And it was amazing. Like I couldn't believe they caught them so quickly. We were in court a few days later, and they were both sentenced. And I have to say, the detectives kept me in a separate room in the courthouse, so I didn't need to be in front of my attacker, and sat with me all afternoon. And it was just, it really made me feel so much better about just the people who are protecting us every day. How I was treated was just phenomenal. And the fact that they cared enough to go track him down and convict him within such a short period of time was absolutely amazing.
Awesome. So did you find out why he chose you?
Yeah, so I sat and talked to the detectives that day in court and asked them a lot of questions because we were there most of the day. And they were just telling me that this guy has been going to, and he had a very long, he was only 21, but he'd had a very long juvenile record.
Okay.
And many, many gun offenses. So this was not his first time. And that he'd been going to local businesses, grocery stores, the home improvement stores, the library, and looking for people to follow home. It was drug related. He's looking for money, prescription drugs, you name it. And so they said, looking at you right now, the way you looked when we came to your house, you were dressed up because I'd gone to church that morning. So I was dressed nicely. I was alone. They said you were at a home improvement store by yourself on a weekend. Odds are, if you are a woman alone at a home improvement store on a weekend, you're likely single. And so there were just lots of different factors that they said would have made me a target. I looked like an easy target. It looked like I lived alone. And so they just chose me to follow home.
So what did you feel and think while you were going through this and while it was happening?
It's amazing. It really is. It sounds so cliche, but you really do kind of see your whole life in front of your face. And I just stopped to think that this could be it. Like, this could be it. And, I've always been a person of faith. And to me, I just thought, if this is how my life ends and it ends here today, that's going to be okay. I'm okay with it, but I'm not going to go down without a fight.
Gotcha.
And I felt very calm at the time, actually. I didn't cry and didn't break down until after the detectives got to my home. I think I was in such a state of, I have to take action and I need to figure out a way out of this, that the adrenaline just kept me going until I felt like I was safe. And that was the first time I really let myself kind of be vulnerable and break. And it was, at that point, there was just a flood of emotions.
Gotcha.
But I have to say, it was amazing. So many people offered me a place to stay if I didn't want to stay in my house. And even not just for a short term, they were giving me rental properties they had if I wanted to stay for several months or if I wanted to move. And people offered to come stay with me. And I was just really blown away by how caring so many people in my life were. I had a girl that I worked with who took the day off work the day I had to go into court to sit there with me all day. She wanted to make sure I was not alone if I had to see the man who attacked me. And so it just meant so much to me. I think in those situations, you really get to see the goodness in a lot of people. Even though it's a terrible situation, you really get to see the best in people.
Yeah.
And that was really my experience with it.
That is sort of comforting, I think, to hear that. So,
yeah.
So would you say you're healed from that experience now?
I am. I, at that point just decided, okay, I'm going to be so much more vigilant. I'm going to take steps to protect myself. I'm going to make sure that I'm not setting myself up to be a victim in any way ever again. Mm-hmm. And so it felt much more empowering. I didn't feel victimized. I really felt educated. This is what can happen. And I've been able to share that with a lot of the people that I've come into contact. There's a lot of younger women that I work with every day that live alone and, just don't take normal safety precautions. And so I've really kind of taken that on myself to tell my story to other people so that they're being aware and don't feel like you're being paranoid. If you think somebody's following you around the grocery store, don't go out to your car alone. Grab the security guard at the front of the store and ask them to walk you out, or, just let somebody know it's okay to trust your gut and trust your instincts. And even if you're like me and you had no idea that somebody's behind you, just be aware. Before you turn into your driveway, take a nice look behind you. Make sure that you don't see something that looks out of place. And if it does, just keep driving and circle around until you feel comfortable going home. And that doesn't make you paranoid. It just makes you aware.
Gotcha. Really good takeaways there. What did the healing process look like from what I understand, it sounds like it was sort of short, but am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, it was, I would say it was short. I felt comfort from the fact that they caught him so quickly. Going to court was difficult. It was difficult to stand up in front of him. He had accepted a deal and then several days later recanted on that deal. And I thought we were going to have to go to court and that we were going to have to go through this all over again. And that went on for several weeks. And so there was just a lot of uncertainty there. And I really was not eager to have to testify in court, especially because he did have a lot of gang associations. My neighbor, who was wonderful and came to my rescue, was tentative about testifying because of some of his affiliations. And so there was a lot of uncertainty around all of that for me. But as soon as I could get past all of that, and I think a lot of it came from just making the decision, lots of people tried to convince me that I needed to move out of my neighborhood and really change the way I live, get roommates. And I talked to the officers who were working my case and just asked them, you guys are in my neighborhood every day and you guys see this, what would you do? And they were wonderful. And they just told me, listen, someone could follow you home from anywhere, from the nicest neighborhood, it's just something that unfortunately happens. And you shouldn't let that dictate how you're going to live your life. And once they told me that, I really felt convicted. I never once spent a night outside of my home. I decided then and there I was going to stick it out. I wasn't going to let somebody drive me out of my house that I loved so much, in my neighborhood that I loved so much. And so in that way, it was somewhat quick in the fact that I kind of made that decision. And once you make that decision, it kind of informs your other decisions.
Gotcha.
But I would say there's definitely moments, especially if I see something on television or watch an episode of Dateline or something, I'll have a little moment of kind of a flashback and I can kind of take myself right back there. But it's definitely something that I think has made me stronger overall.
Gotcha. So did your passion for music play a part in your healing process?
I think from the standpoint that I've just always been unafraid to do things that were a little different than what everybody else wanted me to do. Nobody wanted me to stay in my house. Nobody thought I should stay in this neighborhood. Most people didn't think I should have pursued a career in music. Like there's so many parallels in me. Sometimes you got to take the path that doesn't seem obvious to other people. Mm-hmm. And I've always really kind of taken that to heart. And I'd say in addition to that, it's just so many of the people that came to my side and really stood by me during that time were people that I met through music. The friend that I was having brunch with and that came that night immediately over to my house, she and I had been in a band together for years. And, you know, those relationships have been some of the strongest in my life. And those are the people who came to my side. A girlfriend of mine I used to sing with that had since moved to California called me that night and said, I know we don't talk every day anymore, but I'll fly out there tonight if you need me. And it's those relationships that are probably the most important thing about music and healing me, are the people that share that common interest, and how those people have shown up over and over again in my life. Every time I've had a difficult time or had something really hard, I can count on those people, those relationships to really build me back up.
Awesome. That's really, really awesome. Going back to the support system too, I think it's just a common theme. And so now I want to ask you something that I ask every guest on the show. What does being human mean to you?
I think for me, it's really just about giving more than I'm taking. I really want to deserve all of the love and all of the blessings that I've gotten in this life. And I want to be sure that I'm prioritizing other people before myself. And I think that's the biggest key to life to me. If you're going to be a caring, loving person, that is so much more important than being successful by anybody else's standards. It's really about being there for other people like they've been there for you. And to me, that's the most important thing.
And then, of course, we must know, where can listeners find your music?
You can find me at ChristinaReckard.com, and my music's available also on Amazon, on iTunes, on Spotify. So pretty much anywhere you go to listen to your music, you can find mine there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, Christina, and sharing your amazing story.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You guys, Christina is so brave and is such a go-getter. I loved hearing about how she bounced back from the adversities in her life and how embracing her passion for music really helps her be herself. To get the link to Christina's music and the other cool stuff she mentioned in this episode, go to onbeinghumanpodcast.com/episodes/017. Leave a question, leave a comment, and if you like what you're hearing, remember to go on over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts to subscribe, leave a rating and a review. And as always, we'd love to hear from you. So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Tune in weekly at onbeinghumanpodcast.com for more soul-exposing explorations of what it means to be human. Until next week, love to you all.